Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From the analysis section, in the first topic, we'll try to analyze the challenges which persist in India's startup ecosystem, and we'll also look up to certain innovative suggestions which has been provided by the former CEO of Niti Aayog. Then in the second topic, we'll try to understand what are the salient features of the Prevention of Children from Sexual Offences Act of 2012 in the light of the recent judgments which has been provided by the Supreme Court. Then from your simplified section, we'll be taking up 5 news. We will not only try to simplify the news for you, but also provide the much important value addition and practice questions keeping in mind the approaching prelims 2025, so stay tuned. The lead editorial today in Indian Express actually highlights the issues which prevails in the India's startup ecosystem and provides for some innovative measures that shall be taken. This startup ecosystem forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of the issues related to the Indian economy. So let's start our discussion today by understanding what do we mean by a startup. So let's say, for example, there is a company, a private company called as Power Corporation. And this Power Corporation has been registered under the Companies Act of 2013. And its turnover in any of the previous financial years, turnover basically means the total amount which he has earned, this particular company. So the turnover is actually less than 100 crore rupees. Then this particular private entity would be recognized by the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade as a startup, and it will be recognized so for the next 10 years from the date of its incorporation. So what is the status of startups in our country? So if you look at that, if the status of India's startup ecosystem, as per the Indian Startup Ecosystem Report released by Startup India, it tells us that currently India has the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, following US, which has the largest, and China, which has the second largest. As per the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, currently in our country there exist 1,57,066 recognized startups by the Government of India as of 25th of December 2024. So this is the latest data which is available to us. Remember that 73,000 or almost half of these startups have at least one woman director, which actually showcases the kind of role which are being played by the women in driving innovation and economic growth in our country. Now, between 2014 to 2024, in the last decade, these startups actually raised $150 billion in funding, and remember that almost $11.2 billion of that has been sourced in the year of 2024 itself, and 75% of it has actually been sourced from the foreign institutional investors. So these startups which we have in our country, such as for example Flipkart with the valuation of $25 billion, Paytm with the valuation of $16 billion, or for example your Ola with a valuation of $6.2 billion, all these startups have a combined valuation of more than $500 billion. And in our country currently there are more than 110 plus unicorns, or the private companies or the startups which have a valuation of more than $1 billion. We can selectively use all of this data to actually create an introduction when we are writing the answer on the startup ecosystem. Some more data which has been provided to us by the various ministries, such as for example, if you look at the startup funding, it actually zooms to $12 billion in 2024. With both the funding amount as well as the deal counts which these startups are signing with the foreign institution investors, both of them has increased significantly. Then the funding for such women-led startups, that actually doubled from being $0.48 billion in 2023 to actually jumping to $0.93 billion. However, keep this in mind that this is actually kind of low if we compare it from the 2021. Then the Indian startups have now created over 1.5 million or 15.5 lakh direct jobs, with almost 3.9 lakh creation in 2023, and in 2024 the number being around 1.7 lakh direct jobs being created by these startups. So obviously till now we have actually established the kind of importance these startups have in the Indian economy. Thus, the former CEO of the Niti Aayog actually writes that how there exists much more potential for these India's startup ecosystem, where currently India stands at the threshold of the technological revolution, which actually kind of presents us with immense opportunities in various sectors, as for example your artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analytics, your electrical vehicles, quantum computing, 3D printing, space exploration, etc. And this threshold of tech revolution has been actually derived from the kind of the digital infrastructure revolution which we had, with the adoption of various kind of digital technologies in all the sphere of our life, right? Specifically under the government schemes such as, for example, the Digital India Mission, right? So for example, if we look at the kind of the digital infrastructure revolution which has taken place, just take the example of the UPI or Unified Payment Interface, the kind of Paytm payments which you guys are doing on the daily basis. In August 2024, it actually surpassed around 20 lakh crore rupees of the transaction value. So let's say, for example, because of this ease of the payment which has been provided to us, that will obviously transform into what? The ease of doing business, and thus can we say that the user base for these startup ecosystem using these digital technologies, that has actually been expanding quite a lot. Then there are also the burgeoning talent pool which we have in our country. So for example, if we look at the India Skill Report of 2024, it actually tells us that how 65% of India's current population is actually below 35 years of age, and thus we have quite a demographic dividend. Currently, we are producing around 1.5 million engineering graduates on yearly basis. And this demographic dividend and the talent pool which exists, that is actually being supported by various government policies, such as, for example, under your National Education Policy 2020, the government is actually putting impetus on vocational training as well as impetus upon your entrepreneurship. Then they are actually providing skills which are required for the industry 4.0 for these demographic dividend under, let's say, for example, your Kaushal Vikas Yojana. The former CEO of Niti Aayog also highlights that the government has actively fostered this progress through initiatives like National Quantum Mission, India AI Mission, and Semiconductor Mission, alongside allocating around 1 lakh crore for the research and development. All of these missions has been covered in your previous analysis sections. At the same time, there also exists a kind of a growing domestic market, right, which is actually quite of, indulging into the various emerging sectors in which these startups has the potential to actually grow and expand, such as, for example, your space, drones, defense, right? So the idea is what? That we have a kind of an increasing domestic market which is actually ready for the various kind of cutting edge technologies of the future. Even in the rural hinterlands, for example, the India has extended 4G connectivity now to 6.14 lakh villages. So let's say, for example, you are residing in a rural hinterland. Now you are able to avail, let's say, for example, a cab through Ola, or you are actually ordering for a food delivery through Zomato app. So obviously, the user base for this Ola and Zomato has been expanded with the increasing internet penetration. Just look at the India's digital public infrastructure in numbers a little bit. Currently, we have 1.4 billion total Aadhaar card holders. We have around 112 million plus bank accounts, which has been linked with the accounts aggregator framework. Just look at the amount of total eKYC transactions which has taken place, or for example, the total value of transaction processed on UPI, or the users which are using the services like DigiLocker or your Ayushman Bharat health accounts, etc. So the idea is that we have a huge potential when it comes to this India's startup ecosystem, however, which is being hindered by the various kind of roadblocks which persist. For example, the former CEO of Niti Aayog, he laments when he says that in India, we prioritize avoiding the excessive regulation that could hinder startups. But at the same time, this startup ecosystem, which actually thrives on such minimal regulatory interference, fostering the innovation, it has seen incidents of corporate mismanagement, such as, for example, in the cases related to Byju's, your Dunzo, your Bharat Pay, etc., which has actually raised concern. So there exist both the demand side issues and the supply side issues. Let's try to understand them one by one. If we talk about the supply side issues on the side of these startups, what are the issues which they are facing? So they are facing various kind of regulatory hurdles due to the ambiguity which exists in the Indian law. For example, the CEO is saying that, okay, we are thriving on minimal regulatory interface. However, the recent incidents actually showcases otherwise. For example, if you look at the Motor Vehicle Rule of 2022, passed under the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act of 2018, So in that, you will actually see that there was a kind of a debate which was taking place related to the categorization of app based cab, like for example your Ola, your Uber, etc., that how should we categorize the rule for them. For example, let's say there is a driver and that driver is driving a car of Ola, and there exists some kind of technical glitch, right, or technical issue, because of which, let's say, some accident happens. So now on whom the liability should lie, whether it should be lie on the driver or it should be taken on the cab apps which has been providing the vehicle or the technical services. Or for example, the kind of data localization and the data sharing constraints which has been put on these startups under your Digital Data Protection Act of 2024, which actually puts them what? Kind of a burden of compliance of various kind of regulatory frameworks and rules. Then the major issue which has been highlighted by the former CEO is actually the lack of deep technology innovation which is not taking place in our country. Such as, for example, the startups which are not actually kind of investing in artificial intelligence or big data analytics. There are various reasons for that. One of that is obviously the high capital investment which is required. On the other hand, they actually lack funding. 47% of the startups actually close down because they do not have actually kind of supporting or backing from the investors. Then there is obviously less spending by the government of India on this sector of research and development, because from 2 to 3 years we are stagnant of spending our research and development only 0.7% of our GDP. If we compare it to USA, it actually spends around 3.5% of its GDP on research and development. Then if you look at the kind of 40,000 or more higher educations which exist in our country, only 1% of that actually participates in the research. Today's editorial actually tells us that how in 2023 to 2024, we actually created 25,000 PhD holders. Even then, in the same time period, we actually paid $14 billion for the royalty of the intellectual property right or the innovations done by the other countries. How much we earned? We earned only a meager $1.4 billion in comparison to that. So obviously this showcases us what? The kind of the lack of technological innovations and the investments in this particular area. Then these startups, they actually face kind of scaling challenges. What is the scaling challenges? Where they are not able to diversify into the various market products and they are not able to scale up their initial success. One of the major reasons for that is the kind of the Me Too movement which has been adopted by the startup. What is this Me Too movement? So they say that, okay, there is a successful Western model, Western business model. We are just going to copy that and apply that to India. Beside or completely being ignorant about the need of the Indian customer base. Such as, for example, let's say if Ola and Uber became successful in Bangalore. So there are already lot of taxis and lot of vehicles on already kind of congested and the city which is known for not moving at all, that is Bangalore. But there were various startups related to this taxi ecosystem itself which started sprouting in Bangalore. So obviously they do not have that much of a chance to become successful. And that is the reason that 90% of the startups, they actually fails within the first 5 years, and that basically leads to what? Kind of acquisition by the already big player, such as, for example, the acquisition of Taxi for Sure by Ola. Then as we were talking about the intellectual property rights, just look at the kind of patents which we have been granted in the last 6 to 7 years, only 11%. So that shows the kind of less research and investments which we are doing. Then there exists a kind of an infrastructure gap and the uneven funding. For example, even though we were talking about the internet penetration which has taken place in the rural areas, if we compare it with the urban areas, there is 69% internet penetration in urban areas. Even still lower if we compare it to Japan and China. But this internet penetration in the rural area stands to the 37% of the population. So let's say, for example, there is a startup called as Dehat. And Dehat actually wants to provide these farmers, these rural people with the various services on an app based, such as, for example, your forecasting about the weather, or for example, the prices of seeds and fertilizer. But how it will do so if the 63% of the population of rural areas is devoid of internet connectivity itself? The next is the talent retention hurdle. So if you look at the kind of the McKinsey report, it tells us that how 60% of the tech professionals in our country actually wants to move out to the other developed nations. Why so? Obviously because of the reason that they are getting much better job opportunities there, or the kind of better living infrastructure which will exist there. the good amount of your public health and education infrastructure, and obviously much better labor rights which they will get there instead of in our country. Then there exist various kind of demand side issues as well, such as for example, these startups, they start adopting machine learning and AI based advertising model, completely being ignorant about the needs of Indian customer, which is actually much more value based. Such as for example, let's say there is a news channel and it is showcasing India's abysmal ranking in the global hunger index of 2024. Can anyone tell me what is India's rank in this global hunger index? So it is showcasing that, and just after that you will show what? An ad of Swiggy and Zomato. Or the emergence of oligopoly in this startup sector in a very short span of time, such as for example in food sector you can see the rise of Swiggy and Zomato. So that is taking place, as well as the issue of asymmetrical pricing which is adopted by these companies, where they actually do what? They first of all try to acquire some kind of data from you through various means, such as for example when the Jio app was launched, it was giving all the services for free but asking you some very personal questions to actually identify your needs and everything. And after that they will say that okay, if you want to avail this service you will have to purchase this service first. Then if you look at the Fair Work Report of 2022, it actually highlights the absence of the rights of the workers who are working on contractual basis for very long hours, and that is actually leading to the exploitation of their labor rights in the absence of the implementation of Social Security Code 2020, leading to the case of diminishing return on the labor productivity, where the labor productivity of this demographic dividend is actually declining. At the same time, after pandemic, we have faced what? A kind of a K-shaped recovery, where certain sectors has not been able to recover to its complete optimum even till now. As well as there exists a kind of a high inflation, which will obviously do what? Kind of decline the propensity to consume by the consumers. So obviously they will not go toward these startups to buy the product, rather already the traditional industries or the industries which are kind of established for over the years because of their trust value. This inflation, if you look at the CPIC on the year basis, it rose by 2.9%. So because of these issues, taking the cognizance of it, the government has taken several steps, such as for example, it has provided funds for the startups, where more than 11,000 crore rupees has been committed through alternate investment funds. Recently, the angel tax in the month of July 2024 was abolished on the startup investment. The Section 80 of the Income Tax Act actually provide 100% tax exemptions for 3 consecutive years for these startups if they are making profit. The India's new foreign trade policy is actually envisaging to triple our exports to $2 trillion by 2030. There is a kind of a credit guarantee mechanism which is being provided by the Small Industry and Development Board of India. We have created a kind of a Bharat Startup Knowledge Access Registry called as Bhaskar, where we are bringing the startups, the traditional businesses, the kind of investors, the customers, all of them at one platform. Then, under your Atal Innovation and National Initiative for Developing and Harnessing Innovations, we are actually trying to promote these startups to actually develop much more cutting edge technologies. So, for example, let's say building of more drone, more artificial intelligence based units. And there is Samrid to support 300 software product startups as well. The question which shall arise in your mind is that what are the steps which shall be taken by India to actually further boost the startups? On your left, you guys can see the suggestions which has been provided by the former CEO of Niti Aayog. What he says, there shall be a specialized fund of funds for the deep technology startups. The family offices and businesses shall take active role as angel investors. Now to further, like the government does not want to control and restrict this startup ecosystem. So they shall do what? They shall create a self-regulatory framework to emphasize on accountability and transparency. And there shall be further the educational programs which exist in the colleges, they shall be aligned with the market needs. Then there are certain suggestions which we are bringing, such as for example, transitioning from the Me Too startups. Instead of following the Western business models, try to create your own IP-based innovations. Try to apply and tool this artificial intelligence not only in service sector but also in the manufacturing sector. And we should not only focus upon make in India, but we shall start creating these cutting edge technologies to actually make for the world. where the CEO also says that India's startup ecosystem is no longer now confined to the metro cities. Rather, it has kind of diversified into the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, where 50% of our current startup ecosystem lies. And supporting these regional hubs with infrastructure, educational opportunities, and inclusivity, especially by increasing women representation, will actually unlock the untapped talent and the drive innovation, which is actually quite integral for the idea of Viksit Bharat by 2047. So keep these suggestions in your mind, try to attempt this particular question, and we move forward to the next news, where the article today actually raises grave concern about the sexual offences against the children, as serious charges has actually been put against the former Chief Minister of the state of Karnataka. And this act, this POCSO Act, Prevention of Children from Sexual Offences Act 2012, forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of government policies and intervention. Well, there is a very prominent article written by Ratna Kiruba in a journal called as Think Global Health. The title of that particular article is Silent Suffering, where she actually describes her ordeal or the pain which she went through at the tender age of 13 years old, where she was actually exposed to the child sexual abuse and the kind of persistent trauma which she still faces today because of that tragic event. It were these kind of heinous crimes and tragic events of child sexual abuse itself which actually drives the antagonist of the recently released web series called as Sector 36, which actually perpetuates him to commit some very heinous crimes, the description of itself which can actually shake the conscience of law-abiding people like you and me. A bit of disturbing start to the analyst today? The answer is yes. But this is also the stark reality of the society in which we are living, and I cannot expect from all of you to become a future officer and take the cognizance of these kind of issues unless and until we have developed a complete understanding of such issues. So let's first try to understand the status of this silent suffering as per the report released by UNICEF. If we look at the data provided to us by the National Crime Record Bureau, between 2022 to 23, there was surge of 96% in the cases of sexual violence against the children. And the reported cases of child rape and penetrative assault actually stood at around 38,911. 43% of these were actually, of the rape victims were actually the people who were minor or below the age of 18 years. 1.3% of them were actually less than 6 years old. And remember that 20% of them were actually less than 16 years old. So if you look at the UNICEF report, it tells us that how 20% adult women and 5 to 10% adult men actually recall a child sexual assault. Or 1 in every 5 girls and 1 in every 20 boys is actually a victim of child sexual abuse. Children ages 7 to 13 are considered as the most vulnerable to these kind of issues. 28% of youth aged between 14 to 17 had been sexually assaulted throughout their lifetime. 3 out of 4 adolescents who have been sexually assaulted were actually victimized by someone they knew, their friend, someone of their relative, or something like that. The idea is that any such kind of issue which has been faced by the child in the very formative year of their life, it actually has a kind of a long shelf life. And that actually leads to these tragic events, the kind of bad memories caused by them, to a process called as biological embedding. What is biological embedding? Biological embedding is basically the circuiting of your brain nerves in such a manner that basically decides your response to any kind of distress situation. Such as, for example, in most of the cases, the people who have kind of been abused or has faced this child sexual abuse in their formative years, their natural response to any kind of stress situation is either violence or aggression, leading to an event, something which we are hearing it quite often these days, called as post-traumatic stress disorder. And that basically kind of transitions into two things: either disassociation with the society, where these people, they kind of put a kind of a self-imposed exclusion from the larger society. So that obviously basically hinders what? Their growth physically as well as mentally. Second is that it actually leads to their low self-esteem and self-deprecation, which obviously hinders their prospect to attain higher level of education or to get a good decent job. It can also transform into sexual dysfunction. It can actually lead to fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is basically a kind of a stress situation where a person feels that that person is always in the fatigue condition. Or for example, promiscuity, or establishing sexual relations with a number of people to actually prove your worth to the society or to yourself. And can we say that these kind of mental and physical challenges which are being faced by these children, these innocent children who were sexually abused in their formative years, is it not going to hamper the demographic dividend of our country, which we were just very recently discussing, and the whole idea of Viksit Bharat 2047 altogether? Thus, taking the cognizance of it, the government of India actually came with an act called as Prevention of Children from Sexual Offences Act of 2012. As a consequence of also, because India signed your United Nations Convention on Rights of Children 1992 and we ratified it. So, under this act, which particular person is defined as a child? So, just like your Juvenile Justice Act of 2015, the POCSO Act defines a child as someone who is under the age of 18 years. Now remember that when we talk about the laws in India, the definition of children is not uniform. Such as for example, the 61st Constitutional Amendment Act fixes the minimum voting age as 18. So under that we consider as person to be a minor. The Right to Education Act 2009 says that a child is someone between the age of 6 and 14 years. Similarly, under the Child Labour Amendment Act 2016, it says that child is someone under the age of 14 and an adolescent is aged between 14 and 18. So under the POCSO, any person who is below the age of 18 will be considered as a child. The Act also provides for gender neutrality, where it recognizes both girls and boys as a victim of sexual abuse. Now let's say, for example, who can actually report these cases to the police office, the police station? The answer is, let's say for example, if I am a victim of child sexual abuse, I can go and report. If I have shared this audio with any person, relative, friend, this person can go and report. Or if there is any institution who is working for the child, right? Let's say for example, any NGO, that NGO can go and report as well. There are a lot of NGOs which are actually working for the rights of child in our country, such as for example, there is your Hand in Hand or Cry, or for example, there is your Vagdhara in the state of Rajasthan, which is actually doing quite good work. What is the penalty which has been decided against such child sexual abuse cases? Maximum is death penalty for committing sexual crime. Remember that there is a provision for speedy justice through your fast track special courts. And the POCSO rules 2020 actually provided that there can be the interim compensation can be provided for victim just after filing the first investigation report if ordered by fast track special courts. Compensation such as for example, there to provide them immediate relief, to rehabilitate them, etc. The same kind of compensation can also be provided by the District Child Protection Unit under the Juvenile Justice Act 2015 if ordered by the Child Welfare Commission. Right? So let's say for example, they can provide compensation for providing education, for rehabilitation of them, for health care, etc. However, there also exists a kind of a proportional penalty under this POCSO Act. What is this proportional penalty? So let's say for example, if it is have to decide the age of minor victim, the younger the victim, the more heinous the crimes will be considered, the higher the penalty. The age of the accused, the older is the accused, the more heinous the offense, the higher the penalty. Or for example, the closer such relationship of a familial relationship, the more odious the offense alleged, higher the penalty. The section 29 of the POCSO says that when a person is prosecuted for committing an offense of sexual assault, the special court trying the case shall presume the accused to be guilty. And you have to prove that no, you are innocent. However, there lies certain issues with the POCSO Act 2012 as well. First is obviously the high pendency of the cases which exist. Such as for example, just look at the data provided here. Around 2.4 lakh rape cases which has been booked under this POCSO Act are pending in 764 special fast track courts on 31st of January 2023. With as high as 67,000 cases in UP or 33,000 cases in Maharashtra. What are the reasons for such high pendency of cases? One is obviously the low conviction rate which exists. and why such low conviction rate exists. First is the procedural lapses which can take place in the investigation by the police. So what does the act says that, let's say for example, if such crime has been reported to the nearby police station, the police officer will go and try to investigate that particular case. Now let's say if the victim is a girl child, so obviously that police officer shall be a woman as per the act. But if you look at the kind of the population of the women police officers in our country, that itself stands as abysmal as 10%. What about in the rural hinterlands? There can be complete absence. So now obviously a male investigating officer will go to take the kind of the record of the victim. So that can lead to two cases. One, the girl child will find herself in a very uncomfortable position to actually share her ordeal. Or what will happen that because of the kind of the social taboo which exists in our society, such recording of the statement of the victim can never take place. Then there exists no specific condition to actually prove the recent intercourse. So even with the kind of the scientific advancements we have made, this provision to actually prove that there was such kind of a sexual assault which has taken place very recently, that is something in a very ambiguous situation. So that cannot be established very directly. Then there exists a kind of a issue with age determination of the victim. So what happens that in our society, many of the parents, they actually kind of misreport the age of the child or kind of underreported so that they can get some benefit in the government services. Who knows? You might get an extra attempt in UPSC. So because of that, what happens that many of the time, let's say for example, the two person who has established a sexual intercourse, they might be above the age of 18 years. Thus they are not breaking any law. But because their age has been underreported, they still fall under this issue of POCSO Act 2012. So a lot of such cases has emerged as well. That is why the Bombay High Court actually suggested for the decrease the age of the consent from 18 years to 16 years. Thus, there were recent judgments or the verdict by the Supreme Court related to this POCSO Act 2012, where it also provided for certain reforms which shall be taken. The idea was that the Supreme Court held that any visual depiction of a sexually explicit act with any ordinary person of a prudent mind would reasonably believe to be prima facie depict a child or appear as a child would be deemed as a child pornography for the purposes of POCSO. And the Supreme Court further expanded the scope of Article 15 of this particular act by stating that now there is going to be three kind of fines and three kind of penalties. First, let's say if there is any person who store or possesses pornographic material in any form involving a child, but then he fails to delete or destroy any report or same to the designated authority, 3 years of jail. Any person who store or possess such pornographic material in any form involving a child for transmitting or propagating or displaying or distributing it in any manner, 4 years of jail. Any person who store or possess pornographic material in any form involving a child for a commercial purposes, 5 years of jail. The reforms which were suggested by the Supreme Court were to substitute the term child pornography, right, with this CSEM, right? So child sexually exploited act or material. So that shall be kind of, substituted. Then to promote comprehensive sex education under the National Education Policy 2020, to actually sensitize the larger masses, right, about the taboos which are associated with the sex in our country and the word itself. And then the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights shall actually promote such awareness among the larger society by creating various kind of social engineering campaigns. So keep these suggestions in your mind. Keep this recent verdict related to child sexual pornography in your mind and try to attempt this particular question. We move forward to the next news, where the Supreme Court actually held that the access to clean public toilets for all actually forms a kind of an essential and basic right. So let's first try to assess the issue of sanitation which exists in India and the world as highlighted by the World Health Organization 2024 report, where it said that this issue of sanitation and public hygiene is not only a major concern for South Asia and India but also to the world. In the world where 1.5 billion people do not have basic sanitation services such as, for example, clean toilets and access to clean water. 419 million people still defecate in open. 44% of the household water is actually discharged without any kind of safe treatment. 10% population actually consume the food which is being irrigated by the wastewater, leading to bioaccumulation and biomagnification and thus various kind of disease. And what is the impact of such poor sanitation? So obviously it leads to what? Lost opportunity for decent living and work. Just imagine the people who are living in the slums and the kind of the sanitation services which they are being access to. It actually hinders their socio-economic development. Why? Because of the various kind of the disease which they are exposed to, such as for example the diarrheal diseases, cholera and typhoid, or the spread of antimicrobial disease. It also actually exacerbates what? Stunting and wasting. Can any one of you tell me that as per the UNDP's index, what is India's stunting and wasting standing in the world? Then 1.4 million death has been actually reported by the World Health Organization in the year of 2023 to 2024 in your low and middle income countries. Why? Because of the poor sanitation and poor hygiene. So what was the step which was taken by the India? So on 2nd of October 2014, the government launched Swachh Bharat Mission, the rural component of which is actually being taken care by the Ministry of Jal Shakti, and the urban component is being taken by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. The idea was what? To eliminate open defecation, to actually terminate the issue of manual scavenging, to actually provide a proper solid waste water management system, to actually create flush toilets across the country at a very large scale, and at the same time to actually sensitize the people about these issues related to open defecation. Let's see what all we have achieved. So the open defecation actually dropped from being 60% in 2014 to 19% in 2019, and almost 100% open defecation free status has been achieved by 2024. The rural sanitation increased up to 90% by 2019. The disease in under 5 mortality rate actually declined to 32. The maternal mortality ratio actually dropped to 97 from being 130 in 2014. The top 5 wins has been 12 crore toilets which has been created, 5.87 lakh villages which has achieved open defecation free plus status. So there is also existence of kind of a solid waste water management system in 3.92 lakh villages. Liquid waste management system, prevention of 60,000 to 70,000 infant deaths annually. 93% of the women actually feel safer using the toilets now. The school dropout has been reduced due to the better sanitation. 50,000 has been saved per family in the health cost, and 25,850 billion savings to the Indian economy has been achieved. 70,000 infant deaths has been averted. 6 to 8 point decrease in the under 5 mortality rate as well. 3 lakhs fewer diarrheal death has been there as well. So just note down all of these kind of salient features, the kind of achievements which we have done under the Swachh Bharat mission, to use it in your answer. But remember that there lies persisting issues with the Swachh Bharat mission. First is persisting traditional belief regarding the sanitation work. So if we look at the manual scavenging workers data, 97% of them comes from the depressed class, and that is a kind of a traditional belief which has been passed from generation to generation, kind of a imposition of the caste system, and that shall be eradicated. So manual scavenging shall be eradicated under the Act of 2013. That shall be the idea. Obviously for that we can just try to inculcate much and more technology like Bandicoot, which was being implemented in Kerala, right? The kind of the machine driven sewer cleaning system. Then as per the CAG report, even if the government is claiming all of these achievements, there is no universal access to toilet. So just look at the data provided by the survey of CAG. It says that 58% says that the public toilet under the Swachh Bharat mission are either barely functional or in the terrible state. 25% found public toilets so bad that they went in but came out without using them. If you look at the figures, ODF figures, the open defecation free figures, 4,355 urban local bodies declared themselves to be ODF free, while 3,507 are saying that we are ODF plus, and only 1,191 of them are ODF plus plus. So they have both waste and solid and liquid waste water management system. So that shows that it is not being implemented across the country at a uniform level. Then obviously there exist less success stories of the technological interventions which are being done under the Swachh Bharat mission. Why? Because there exists lack of funds with these urban local bodies. So obviously creation of these toilets, the kind of infrastructure which it requires, is not a profitable venture for these ULBs. So they are not investing that much into it. And then there exists a lack of sanitation inspectors, and obviously the issue of water shortage in our country. We have 4% of the world's water resources to cater to 18% of the population, and the kind of the water demand which has been increased because of this impetus on Swachh Bharat mission, that is going to be a challenge as well, right? So basically the idea is, what are the steps which we can take? First of all, we should take the cognizance of the Supreme Court's ruling, where it held that the clean public toilets for all, which includes men, women, person with disabilities, and transgender people, is not only a matter of convenience but a basic right and essential part of human dignity under Article 21 of the Constitution. And the court specifically highlighted that even though the public toilets has been built every toll plaza in the national highways across the country, we seldom find them to be maintained and be accessible. Thus, following the directive under Article 47 of the Constitution, which actually direct the state to improve the public status, to public health, first of all, we should focus on the vulnerable section. We need to integrate these public toilets with the public health infrastructure to actually achieve the targets under SDG 6. There is a need to actually bring behavioral change, and that we can do through the promotion and using the mass media as well, such as, for example, the kind of sensitizing movies like Toilet Ek Prem Katha. Or we need to improve the sewer infrastructure, and further taxation power shall be provided to these urban local bodies so that they can actually create a kind of a sound, profitable infrastructure, and they can further invest in these kind of sanitation system. With this, we move forward to the next news, where we are actually going to look at the 3 new naval combatants which has been commissioned in the Indian Navy. And before that, we'll try to have a quick overlook about the data sheet related to Indian Navy. The Indian Navy, which has the responsibility to safeguard our maritime borders, which actually kind of expands up to 7,516 kilometers, and we currently share our maritime boundary with 7 countries. Can any one of you in the comment box take the dare and name the 7 countries with which we share our maritime boundary? The idea or the motto of this Indian Navy is what? Sham no Varuna. Varuna is basically the god of water. So the god of water just protect us. Idea is, who is the supreme commander of Navy? Just like military and the air forces, it is the president and headed by the chief of naval staff. The Indian Navy Day is specifically celebrated on the 4th of December. Why? Because it was on this date where we actually conducted Operation Trident 1971 against the Pakistan, where we kind of used our submarines to destroy their naval ships. Then there are 2 important projects which you guys should know. First is your Project 15B, under which we are actually developing guided missile destroyers by the Mazagon Dock Limited. And then there is your Project 75, under which we are building diesel electric attack submarines. So just look at the kind of the classification we have. We have kind of nuclear capable submarine launched missiles, such as, for example, K4, K15. INS Arighat is one of the nuclear capable submarine. Keep this in mind, right? Then if you look at the India submarine fleet, the nuclear powered ballistic missile submarines are your INS Arihant and INS Arighat. The nuclear attack submarine is your INS Chakra. The diesel electric submarines are there like Kalvari, Shishu Kumar and Sindhu Ghosh. So just remember this classification. This can appear in your prelims examination. Now the 3 new entrants are, first is your INS Nilgiri. The Nilgiri class stealth frigate, right, which we have included under the code name Project 17A. It is first of the 7 frigates in the Project 17A, which is being built by the Mazagon Dock Shipbuilders Limited, right? And this class of ships actually does what? It includes kind of an integrated construction philosophy, where it involves extensive pre-outfitting at the block stages to reduce the overall building period. See, the idea is what? What we mean by this stealth frigate? Stealth frigate is that we are designing these ships in a way that it has the minimum response to any kind of radar, any kind of sound reflection, the minimum thermal signature as well. Right? How we do that? Just look at the kind of the continuous superstructure which is designed for such a stealth frigate, right? Which actually reduces the radar, noise, infrared and electromagnetic radiation signature. Or for example, just look at the modern frigate of this French Navy, where this faceted appearance actually reduces the radar cross section of the stealth. These multi-mission frigates are capable of operating in the blue water environment in the deep seas far from the coast and deal with both conventional and non-conventional threats. Where what we are actually including in this INS Nilgiri: supersonic surface-to-surface missile, medium-range surface-to-air missile system, rapid-fire close-in weapon system. And the more ships which will now follow INS Nilgiri will be your Himgiri, Taragiri, Udaygiri, Dunagiri and Vindhyagiri. Then the next entrant is INS Surat, right? Which, remember, it can appear in your prelims. It is Indian Navy's first artificial intelligence enabled warship, where we are actually kind of developing the guided missile destroyers of Kolkata class built under the project codenamed 15A. Now we are following what? The project 15B, right? Which was signed in the year of 2011. These destroyers are basically a category of warships that have high speed and maneuverability. So it has a speed up to 56 km per hour. They have greater strike capability. For example, it can lead to displacement of 74,000 tons and a length of 164 meters. Because of which they are a key asset in the various type of naval operations. So remember Project B, right? Remember that under this, there are 3 more which are already been developed: INS Visakhapatnam, Mormugao and Imphal. So whenever there is a kind of a name of place is coming, remember that they are what? They are the destroyer warships. And here, because we are using artificial intelligence, we are actually going to integrate network-centric warfare with modern sensors and communication. The last one is your INS Vakshir. INS Vakshir is the 6th and the final submarine of the modern stealthy cavalry class, right? Where the Scorpion class designed and developed by the French defense major naval group and the Spanish state-owned Navinentia. This is basically a diesel electric transmission system and are primarily attack or hunter-killer submarines. So INS Vakshir is basically what? A kind of a submarine, which basically works upon what? An air-independent propulsion technology. And it is named upon whom? Upon a type of a sandfish which is found in the Indian Ocean, where it is the world's most silent and versatile diesel electric class of submarine, which can indulge into any kind of anti-surface warfare, anti-submarine, intelligence gathering, area surveillance, etc. It has a very advanced sonar system and it also has wire-guided torpedoes and anti-ship missiles. Remember these 3 combatants, remember the important salient features, and we move forward to the next news, where we are actually going to read about the 3rd Kashi Tamil Sangam which is about to take place. Before this, 2 Kashi Tamil Sangam has actually taken place. So what is the idea of conducting this Kashi Tamil Sangam? The idea is to actually celebrate the historical and the civilizational connection which lies between the 2 ancient cities. One is Varanasi, which is actually named upon the 2 rivers which used to exist at that point of time, Varuna and Asi. Combination of them become actually Varanasi, and the Tamil region or the region of your Tamil Nadu. So connection between north and south. It is conducted by whom? It is conducted by the Ministry of Education, right, which actually puts impetus upon developing these traditional linkages to actually further explore the connection as guided by the National Education Policy 2020 as well. For example, if you look at our ancient literature, we come across Brahman Puran, which actually describe the King Dashrath, whose son was the Lord Ram, visit to the Kanchipuram in the south. Or for example, the story of King Parakram Pandya, 15th century CE, who actually came to take water from the region of Kashi. When he was going back, he put that water at one place, right? And he was then unable to lift it. So he actually created a kind of a Shiva Kashi temple in the Tamil Nadu, right? Or there is also a kind of a Vishwanath temple which exists at Tenkasi in the region of Tamil Nadu, also built by these Pandya rulers. So the first such Kashi Tamil Sangamam actually took place in the year of 2022 under the larger Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. And this is one of the prominent initiatives which you guys can also quote when you are writing about the idea of Ek Bharat Shresth Bharat. Now the 3rd Kashi Tamil Sangam is actually going to take place upon the theme of a rishi named Rishi Agastya. Who is Rishi Agastya? Also called as Agasthyar in Tamil Nadu. So in Rig Veda, he is considered to be the first saint who actually ventured past the region of your Vindhya mountains or towards south. He is considered as the father of Siddha medicine. So remember all of this fact, what UPSC can do, it can give you a description and ask which sage of the Rig Veda has been described. So he is considered as the father of Siddha medicine. He is also mentioned in the Rig Veda, specifically the conversation between him and his wife Lopamudra. Lopamudra along with Apala and Vishwasara, all of these are actually the women poets which has been mentioned in Rig Veda. So there is a conversation which takes place between Lopamudra and King Agastya, Rishi Agastya, where they both actually indulge in the conversation, where Rishi Agastya talks about the importance of actually becoming a kind of a person who has become Pravajaka or a wanderer, just leaving all the material wealth. But then Lopamudra tries to convince him to tell him about the importance of the household life as well. Then in Tamil literature, he is actually considered to be the originator of the Tampra Parnyan medicine and establishing the Shaiva centers in the south. So for example, when you read about the Bhakti movement, you come across the Nayanar sect, right, who were basically the Shaivite saints. There were 63 such, right? Can anyone tell me the name of the woman Nayanar saint? Anyone? Then in Ramayana, he's actually said to be living in the Dandaika forest region in the Deccan area in Nasik on the bank of Godavari. And in the South Indian tradition, he is also considered as the compiler of the first Tamil grammar whose name is Agatyam. So remember these important facts about the sage Agastya from the Rig Veda. Remember Lopamudra, Vishwasura, the women poets of Rig Veda, and we move forward to the next news, where we'll try to understand the concept of what is blood money, which has featured in the newspaper today. Why we are reading about this concept of blood money? Because the death sentence which has been awarded by a Yemen court to the nurse Nimishi Priya from Kerala for murdering her business partner, and the subsequent debates and efforts which has emerged surrounding her acquittal and repatriation, which involves monetary compensation which shall be paid to the victim's family. So what is this concept of blood money or diya which has been prescribed in Islamic Sharia law? So let's say, for example, on a fateful day, it happened that one of you came and you said that, sir, you are teaching so well, we are going to kill you, right? Let's say you kill me, then what will happen? Then now you will actually be required to pay a quantity of valuable asset, primarily monetary, which shall be given to the victim's family or my family. Who will be giving it? The perpetrator of crime, which is you. Now let's say, for example, if the victim, see, this will only happen if the victim's kin, my family, does not choose to retaliate through the qisas which are mentioned in the Islamic Sharia law. What are these qisas? Qisas are basically the way of retribution under Sharia. So let's say, for example, we had a kind of an agreement, right? You have killed me, my family has accepted the kind of the valuable asset or the monetary compensation which was being provided by you, by the perpetrator of the crime. So can now the state cannot impose any deterrent punishment? The answer is no. The state still has the right to kind of impose any kind of penalty or punishment upon you, even if though this agreement or this diya or blood money has been exchanged between us. So as for example, if you look at Saudi Arabia, in Saudi Arabia it has a specific rules or the traffic regulations which actually mandate the payment of blood money in the case of road accident. Or for example in Iran, where the women's compensation is actually fixed at half of the men. So for example, if you kill me, I am a man, you need to pay me 100 rupees. But if you would have killed a woman, you only had to pay 50 rupees. That is Iran for you guys, right? What is our stand on diya? Do we have a kind of a similar concept? So the blood money do not find a place in India's formal legal system. However, remember, the system does provide a way for the accused to negotiate with the prosecution through the plea bargaining. What is this concept of plea bargaining? So the concept cannot be directly equated with blood money, but the scheme actually lays out a procedure whereby the defendant actually agrees to plead guilty for a particular offense in the return for a concession from the prosecutor. So let's say, for example, if I have died and my family is fighting a case and the lawyer which is representing us, so you can negotiate with the lawyer that if there is kind of a out of the court settlement which can be done, right? The concessions can be offered on the charge of a sentence. In a former, the defendant may plead guilty for one of the several charges or a less severe charge in the return for the dismissal of other charges. Or you can actually ask to reduce the sentences what is prescribed for the concerned offense. So this was actually included, this idea of plea bargaining, through the Criminal Law Act of 2005. Remember, it can be taken up only for the offenses that are penalized with the imprisonment less than 7 years. So not obviously for murder. And accused shall voluntarily come forward to plead guilty. It was not like you are hiding somewhere and then the police went there and caught you and then you are asking for this plea bargaining as well. Don't do that. It is not available for what? It is not available for crime against women or children. Children is specifically less than 14 years. So in this case it is 14 years. Under POCSO it is 18 years. Or if you have done any heinous crime of murder or rape, obviously. And any offenses involving civil rights. So remember this concept of plea bargaining, remember the concept of the diya, right, or the blood money, and we move forward to the next news, where we are actually going to talk about the ISRO success to actually grow plant in the space. First question which you shall ask me, sir, that why we need to grow plants in the space. So first let's see what ISRO has done. ISRO has actually grown kind of a lobia or a black-eyed pea seeds which they sent to the space as the part of its compact research module for orbital plant studies, or the crops germinated last week. So this crops is what the initiative of ISRO, remember it. Why we need to grow plants in this space? So when we are actually venturing into these lengthy space missions, so for example Gaganyaan or the Mangalyaan which we had, right, these plants can actually provide a kind of a sustainable food source for us there, right? Because anyway we have a kind of a minimal scope for restocking the supplies. So the astronauts cannot simply rely on a limited stock of multivitamins during the missions that may go on for years, right? Also, because these plants release oxygen during the photosynthesis, the growing of them can actually help to keep the air aboard spacecraft breathable. Plants can actually recycle carbon dioxide and organic waste, creating a kind of a closed loop life support system. But why then it is so hard to actually grow these plants in the space? The most significant challenges which this astronaut faces is that the condition in which people or object appears to be weightless, called as microgravity. So in this condition of lack of gravity, in the plant roots, instead of growing downwards, it actually kinds of hinders it. And in addition to making nutrient delivery is also a difficult task, right, through xylem and phylum. So the water tends to actually cling to any surface it touches in microgravity. When sprayed onto the base of a plant, it does not trickle down to the roots where it would be absorbed, right? Then also there are other challenges, such as for example, they are protected from the high level of radiation that can actually damage their DNA and hinder the growth, and insulated from temperature fluctuations, often hundreds of degrees than normal in the space. If we talk about the light conditions, especially in the outer solar system where sunlight is scarce, pose another challenge. Without light, photosynthesis stops and plants begin to consume more oxygen actually than they produce, right? So there are different kind of method which has been suggested by the today's explained article. First is the vegetable production system, right, where we kind of create a closed loop system, fill the oxygen there, we have a little bit of a soil layer where we'll be producing these kind of plants, like kind of a 6 plant bag something. Then the second is to use actually hydroponics, where we actually create a kind of a water ecosystem instead of a soil ecosystem, right? So there is an air pump that provides the essential nutrients which are required for the plant. These nutrients are then sucked by the plant roots, right? And that creates a kind of a hydroponic system. The article actually kind of highlights the aeroponic, which, remember, reduces the water usage by 98%, fertilizer usage by 60%, and completely eliminates the need of pesticide altogether, where these plants are actually discharged in this kind of a aeroponic system. There is a kind of a mist nozzle. So here we basically spray the nutrients which are actually required for the plant. This is your nutrient solution, right? And the roots, if they require the water, there is a minimal amount of water which is provided to them. So remember this hydroponic and aeroponic system with which also we can actually grow the crops, right? Remember the challenges which these plants actually faces when they are actually being grown in the space. Remember the crops mission of ISRO. And with this we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation and thank you.